everyone. Welcome to our informal session today. And I guess our first hearing is going to be from the Virginia Beach Community Development Corporation. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor Wood, and members of the City Council, and City Manager, Mr. Duhaney. I am Frank Mckinney, Virginia Beach Community Development Corporation.
Sir, why don't you go ahead and take your mask off? We can understand you a little better. We're cleaning off the mics in between.
I'll trust you, Mayor. Thank you, sir.
Oh, well, but welcome to both of you.
Welcome. Good afternoon, Mayor Dyer and Vice Mayor Wood and members of the City Council, Manager Duhaney. I am Frank Mckinney, the Virginia Beach Community Development Corporation Board Chairperson and President. I'm proud to be a member of the board. This amazing organization, and I'm very pleased also to be here today to deliver a very positive report. VBCDC's work is very near and dear to my heart. I have been a friend of this organization for over 15 years. It gives me great pleasure to know that I am with others, board members, making a difference in our community today by serving. I'd like to thank you, members of the City Council, for your support of the Virginia Beach Development Corporation. Now I would like to introduce Jessica Glambo, Virginia Beach City Development Corporation CEO, to make our presentation today. Thank you very much.
Again, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to be here today to provide the status report and update on the progress that VBCDC has made since the city audit. All right. Thank you. It's the advance arrow. It still doesn't appear to be advancing. Thank you.
We can't hear anybody from the microphone.
You can. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, could I have the next slide? The microphone's not on? Is that better? Okay. Can you all hear? I can do that. I can be a little bit louder as long as I don't blow you away. Is that better? Okay, I can do it. Thank you. The presentation and update was generated in response to the findings and recommendations identified in the June 2019 report. I have shared the status report and update with Lyndon Ramias, and he has advised that I could share with you that he's very satisfied with the progress and very happy with the direction and the corrective actions that were made in such a short time. VBCDC has made great strides in addressing the recommendations, and we hope that you agree. This presentation incorporates the progress and outcomes made on 3 sets of outside recommendations, including the city auditor, the city manager, and the outside independent consultant. Next slide, please. VBCDC was created by the city in 1985 to provide affordable housing and assist the city with neighborhood revitalization. We have a dedicated and talented staff who work hard each and every day to fulfill our mission of serving the community with affordable housing needs. Next slide. I want to thank our 2 city council liaisons, Mr. Moss and Mr. Berlucci. You are both champions for our organization and our mission, and we appreciate the time that it takes for you to come to our board meetings, and thank you both for your support and your contributions.
Very nice pictures also, gentlemen.
VBCDC reached full board membership effective March 2021 through council's support and appointments. We have a dedicated and talented board who believe in and support our mission. Our board attendance rate is excellent at just under 90%. VBCDC owns and operates over 500 units of affordable housing serving low income and vulnerable populations. We remain a leader in the region serving vulnerable veterans with supportive services, housing-focused case management, and financial assistance. We serve over 3,300 persons per year through our attainable housing and supportive services programs. The assessed value of our properties exceeds $61 million, with $33 million of it net equity. Our annual budget for this current fiscal year is $5.6 million. The next set of slides reviews key organizational accomplishments since the June 2019 audit. VBCDC reversed the operating loss trend through deep cost reductions, increased grant funds, and increased rental revenue. Last fiscal year, our net operating income was $348,000 before depreciation, which is a positive swing of approximately $700,000 since 2018. VBCDC's line of credit balance was reduced by $1.1 million in February of this past year through grant funding from the city. The remaining $665,000 will be paid off with loan funds when they are received from the Virginia Beach Development Authority. Our board of directors and our management staff are so very grateful for the reinvestment in our organization. VBCDC increased its occupancy rate by 7% and is holding stable at 95% or greater for the past 11 months. At the end of April, our occupancy rate was 96%. The next slide shows the Regional Cyprus Landing project, which provides permanent supportive housing for 50 homeless and disabled veterans and their families. The Cyprus Landing construction was completed in December of 2019, and we closed on permanent financing in July of 2020, which removed VBCDC's construction loan guarantees. The project will provide over $1.8 million in net income to VBCDC over the next 15 years. Since the date of the audit, VBCDC has secured $696,500 in grant commitments to renovate and modernize 62 homes. In addition to the external funds that were generated, VBCDC spent $530,000 of its own operating funds on capital improvements since July of 2019. Those improvements include items such as roof replacements, window, siding replacements, trim, gutters, as well as interior bathroom and kitchen modernization and rehabilitation. Beach Park, which was purchased by VBCDC in 1996, serves 18 consumers of the city's Human Services Department. This 10-townhome-style apartment complex underwent a capital improvement project, which was completed just last month. This reinvestment included roof replacement, exterior door replacement, water heater and appliance replacement, as well as some kitchen remodels and flooring replacements. The Citywide Homes program was refinanced in December of 2020 through Virginia Housing and will be undergoing capital improvement reinvestments this summer. With the refinance, VBCDC is saving approximately $15,000 per year on its debt service. The rehabilitation is funded through loan funds and with grant funds secured through the city's Housing and Neighborhood Preservation Department. VBCDC increased our competitiveness to gain housing projects and programs. We applied for competitive COC funding from HUD for a new rental housing subsidy program serving chronically homeless singles and couples. We were successfully awarded funding, and this new program began in September of 2020. VBCDC was also selected by Seniors Unlimited Lifestyles, Inc. to be the lead partner to develop Phase 2 of Tranquility at the Lakes in Burton Station, which will serve low-income seniors. VBCDC received a commitment of $750,000 in home funds and 20 project-based vouchers from the city's housing department. Shown here are the project renderings for Tranquility at the Lakes 2. We're waiting to hear if the project was funded with tax credits from this year's highly competitive application round. We should know that within the next month or so. In March, the merger was achieved with VBCDC's partner organization, Second Act Communities. Through this merger, all the assets and liabilities of the partner organization were transferred to VBCDC as the surviving organization. The next two slides show items that were closed out by the city auditor in March of 2020. The closeout included 10 of the 16 recommendations. The next set of slides details VBCDC's progress on the remaining items. VBCDC reversed our operating loss trend through a multifaceted approach. We are reinvesting in and recapitalizing our properties. We have increased both our rental and our grant revenue. We have eliminated non-essential personnel and expenses, and we've implemented the staffing recommendations made by the independent consultant. We are consistently monitoring expenses, revenues, and year-end projections. VBCDC has balanced the budget. We ended last fiscal year with an operating surplus of $65,000, and we anticipate that we will end this year with a surplus as well. We have also significantly increased our grant revenue since the date of the audit, securing over $6.5 million in grant revenue for programs and operations. Some highlights of this include $4.8 million in grant funds from the Department of Veterans Affairs for our Support Services for Veterans Families program, $301,212 from the Small Business Administration for the Payroll Protection Program, and $120,578 from HUD to operate a new rental housing assistance program. The Code of Conduct policy has been revised. Our Board of Directors reviewed and approved changes to the Code of Conduct policy in September of 2020. Those changes included the auditor's recommendations. This policy was implemented and management provided training in September. The property replacement reserve policy is being reassessed. Staff met with the city's finance director and the Housing and Neighborhood Preservation Director to review and discuss potential changes to this policy in September 2019, just after the audit. However, when the consultant was hired to provide a comprehensive review of our asset management functions, the policy changes were tabled to get feedback from that consultant. The consultant recommended that VBCDC Board of Directors review the policy after first addressing the line of credit repayment and the mitigation of future operational shortfalls. So the Finance Committee will meet in May to review the upcoming budget. We'll also anticipate that the line of credit will be fully repaid before the end of our fiscal year. Management will then resume its reassessment of the replacement policy. VBCDC has eliminated the outsourcing of the facilities maintenance team and has improved our asset management operations. Our occupancy rate reached 95% in May of 2020 and has been at 95% or greater for the past year. We have also implemented the consultant's staffing recommendations for asset management. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the merger was achieved with our partner organization, which eliminated the need for the shared services agreement. Also, the conflict of interest was eliminated, as was the non-coordinated action between the two organizations. Next steps include finalizing the strategy for the refinance and recapitalization of Grand Cyprus Apartments, which VBCDC purchased in 2016 as a workforce housing preservation project. Next steps also include management will present a balanced budget to the Finance Committee later this month with a request for final approval by June 30th from the VBCDC Board of Directors. VBCDC is very excited to launch into our next 5-year strategic plan. Our board of directors created a new committee which will provide governance and leadership for the process, which we anticipate will kick off within the month. VBCDC is committed to our mission of providing affordable housing. We have a dedicated staff who are true servant leaders and who have worked diligently to make a positive difference. And I would like to thank them for all their support and their efforts. I would also like to thank you, the members of City Council, for reinvesting in the organization so that we can continue to do the much-needed work of providing affordable housing in our city.
Very nice and encouraging response. Mr. Bellucci, and then Mr. Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I don't have as many questions as I really do some comments and reflection. And I want to thank you, Ms. Guglielmo, for your presentation and just to provide some context for this presentation, which comes almost 2 years after the results of the audit from the city on the organization. And I think what you've illustrated here today is that the VBCDC is in very good hands with you, of course, as the CEO and in leadership, but also with the entire team that you have in place, and many of them are here today, including members of your staff and board members. And I think it's a tribute to you and to the work that you do that so many volunteers and professional staff are here with you today to support your presentation and support the mission that you do at the VBCDC. It's been a remarkable recovery, an incredible turnaround, and I think it's one that the residents of Virginia Beach, I know, certainly should be and are very proud of. So I want to thank you for that, and I want to thank this council for making the decision to reinvest in the VBCDC and to support, really, ultimately, the people who you support. And that's what that was all about, in directing that CARES Act funding in order to make that possible. And specifically, I'd like to thank Councilmember Moss, who I think he and I make a great team as liaisons to this commission. And I've learned a lot from Councilmember Moss in the 2 years that I've been working with him here. And I know he has some remarks, but I just want to thank you, Councilmember Moss, for the work that we've done together with this commission. And it's been a real pleasure working with you and the entire team. And I want to thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.
Gracious remarks. Mr. Moss, then Ms. Wilson.
Well, I want to thank Councilman Bellucci for those very kind remarks. It is a great team, and we kind of don't always get to the same meeting at the same time, but one of us is always there. That's the key. But I also wanted to mention someone who's not here today, who I kind of worked with for a short time, but who carried a lot of work as we tried to move towards reform, was Councilwoman Shannon Kane. She really, I could say with a lot of success, but she did a lot of groundwork that I picked up on after she departed. And I think we always had a great staff, and I think the staff really has shined through with the new leadership. And I really do appreciate the staff for the city council itself for taking the risk and investing in the staff. And the new board that we appointed has just been stellar. They show up at all the meetings, they ask probing questions, they are definitely hands-on, and I think you can see that the money that we invested of the taxpayers of the CARE Act was an opportunity. Because of that, we got additional affordable housing in our city that we weren't on track to achieve, and they're just doing a super job. And I look forward to, in fact, I told them, I think I shared with you, I asked them to build up a $2 million shopping list in $250,000 increments so that when the infrastructure money comes around in the next 12 months, Mr. City Manager, that they would have a list that would compete against other items. Everything's a competition here, but to have stuff ready so we could increase the modernization of the housing units that they own. And I really appreciate, and I have a lot of fun with this group of people. And thank you very much, and thanks to my colleagues.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Wilson?
Wow, this is quite a presentation and a real breath of fresh air from the struggle that we've had for a while. And many compliments to our liaisons that have worked hard, and to you and your staff and your board. And what a great group that you've pulled all of this together. I've always said if you live in Virginia Beach, you should be able to, if you work in Virginia Beach, you should be able to live in Virginia Beach. So this is really making this possible. So this is a wonderful report, and I'm so glad to get this. I did have a question about the merger with Second Act, because I know Second Act was venturing into other localities. how is that, are they still in some of the other cities? And if they are, how does that work?
So when VBCDC merged with Second Act Communities, it completely dissolved Second Act Communities. So the property that Second Act Communities owned as a result of the merger got transferred to VBCDC. So the regional veterans project called Cyprus Landing exists in the city of Chesapeake, and there are 3 single-family homes that Second Act Communities owned in the city of Norfolk, which as part of the agreement for the loan funding from the Virginia Beach Development Authority, we are to dispose of those properties. So that will be also part of our next steps.
Well, again, thank you for a wonderful presentation, but also thank you for such a great report and good news.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Wood.
Thank you. I wanted to echo the comments of Mr. Moss and Mr. Berlucci. I think it's no secret that there were more than a couple of us that actually questioned the viability of VBCDC when the initial audit report came out, and we learned what dire straits, I'm sorry to use the word dire straits.
No, you're not sorry, I know that.
That y'all were in, and I couldn't be happier to see this. I think this is really good. I think it's a great job that you and your board have done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Henley.
Well, I just also want to echo what the others said. You all are miracle workers, all of you who have worked on this, and the Community Development Corporation was such a good thing for so many years. It was really concerning to see what had happened to it, and that you all have pulled it out and have done it so quickly is just amazing. Thank you. Appreciate it so much.
All right, anyone else? You know, I would just like to say thank you very much. I think this is a testimony to the tenacity and the vision of people when they put minds together in like-minded spirit with a common vision of success. Success is inevitable. So thank you all. Thank the liaisons. Thank the council. You know, I think the word team effort was used, and it was definitely a good team, but the team has some remarkable leadership. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm humbled by your words.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, we're going to move on to the reconciliation. I'm going to ask Vice Mayor Wood to, to go from here.
Everybody has a copy of this letter. I'm happy to read all 7 pages if you like, but if everybody has it and they don't want to hear me lose my voice about 3 pages in, I'm happy just to hit the highlights of it for the viewing public. This does provide this over and above what we had in the original budget letter, an additional 1.5% compensation, some additional funding for public safety with respect to incentives and structural adjustments to make us more competitive, reducing the general fund real estate tax rate to $1 even. There's a table on page 2 indicating Virginia Beach is by far the lowest in the region in terms of that. And entering into a memorandum of understanding, providing up to $500,000 for pay supplements to the public defenders, a memorandum of understanding for pay supplements of $114,000 for the court clerks in juvenile domestic relations and general district court, the funding $300,000 for MOCA, $220,000 for a playground in Friendship Village, additional funding for staffing of ambulances, additional staffing for flooding, regional grants to Hampton Roads Pride and Eggleston, starting a family shelter program at the Housing Resource Center when a contract with Samaritan House expires, and that would be 2 new FTE positions. Will save the city about $33,511. There are a number of pass-throughs for human services. The dedicated reserve, $104,880 for automatic license plate readers, $120,000 to provide an independent assessment of the Virginia Beach Police Department's policies and procedures and body-worn cameras, a reserve of $100,000 to support a potential citizen review panel. Offsets and revenues are indicated here. $3 million in the general fund allocated to market salary reserve, reduced general fund debt service by $1.5 million, interest income from general fund interest is increased by $1 million, offsetting a portion of general fund with the sheriff's revenue fund of $809,000. Proposed health insurance reserve eliminated of $1.5 million. Appropriate $879,000 of general fund balance from the emergency needs contingency reserve, and additional savings of attrition savings of $6.1 million used to balance. The school's budget is said here. That's very detailed. We've all seen this before. The additional stormwater CIP projects, adding $5 million to stormwater infrastructure cost participation project 100582. Additional work, no new funding is this, but additional work through the Virginia Conservation Assistance Program that Ms. Henley has been working on. $500,000 general fund to support the CEPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. $630,000 to continue the gunshot detection system, which would be at the oceanfront and then in targeted other communities in the city. $1.6 million to general fund balance to crime prevention facility renovation at the future police headquarters. Public safety equipment replacement of $250,000. Wi-Fi in city parks of $61,400. Security, there was a request for intercoms. That's actually in the budget for the security office within emergency management, where we specifically put that in there, and appropriated $1 million of general fund to park playground renovations. As we recall, there's approximately $125,000 backlog in Parks and Rec. There's a good bit of backup detail here, and what I wanted to say to everybody is the budget is not any one single person's budget. It is what I heard when I spoke to everybody. It's as close to a consensus as I could get on everything. People had a number of things that they wanted. Some people wanted some things, some people wanted others, but we kind of tried to go right down the middle as much as possible. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
And I just want to thank Vice Mayor Wood for taking the initiative, and everybody working with the Vice Mayor to, do the best we can. Certainly live in some very challenging times, and while we came through a lot better than a lot of cities, we certainly have our challenges ahead. At this point, I'll open it up for comment. Mr. Moss.
I would ask the city clerk's help passing these out, and while she does that, I have acknowledged, and I talked with Jim on the phone, I really did appreciate and realize this is a product of consensus. It's just not my consensus. And I expressed to the Vice Mayor where my threshold was, which was a revenue-neutral real estate rate. I think if we can afford $12 million in compensation increases, that we can provide more tax relief and dividends to our residents. But I'll let you read that. I'm not going to read my letter either. I don't think it's going to be overly persuasive anyway, but I am going to post it on social media. But I just want to take my time here today to talk to two factual mistakes in the air, which I'm sure that you'll want to correct. If you look at paragraph 1 and you go down, it says, among these are tax reductions for citizens. I'd like someone to show me who that got a 3.7% or better real estate tax assessment on their home got a tax reduction by this budget. I think the tax rate is higher than the state law required rate until we hold a public hearing. The default revenue neutral by state law tax rate is 98 cents 87, so 0.9887. We have to hold a public hearing, we have to give a public notice, and we have to vote to increase the tax. So a dollar tax rate is a tax increase of 1.13%. So we didn't reduce the rate. This doesn't say rate, it just says tax reduction. So when you apply the new rate to the increased assessments, citizens are not seeing, for the most part, a reduction in the bill that they get. So I don't know, among these are tax reductions for citizens is not a correct statement. It may be true for a subset of property holders, but it is a minority of property holders, and I don't believe the city manager and his staff can produce the math which shows that 100% of all the property owners are getting their taxes reduced. So that should be corrected. If you turn to page 2, this is a chart that we often use, and I talk about it every year, but I guess the listening ears aren't working. We claim we have the lowest real estate tax rate, but that's if you don't normalize the rate. The citizens in Chesapeake get their trash service included in their tax rate. So if you take the $37 million plus of revenue, which is a little bit more than 100, and divide that by 6.2 to say what's the equivalent real estate tax rate of that amount of money, our tax rate would be $1.06. So if the chart is normalized, which it should be, because all these other service cities other than Chesapeake charge for taxes, we have among the lowest rate, but we really don't have the lowest rate. But I think the rate isn't the real issue, Mr. Mayor. I think is what do we offer in terms of value for the rate we pay? That's like anything. You can get a cheaper paint, but why do you buy this paint? It's a better value. So I think we should say we have a better value for the rate, and I think that's true. We have the best value for the rate. We don't have the lowest rate. But it gets back to how do we share the prosperity of our community? Because we have done better than most communities, but there's a lot of our community that hasn't done well. And I think we could do a lower rate. Look at all the spending that we chose to do rather than provide a lower real estate, revenue neutral real estate tax rate. I think it is within our means and is within our ability. We have just chosen not to. And despite other parts of this, and I critiqued this letter in red, you'll see it's quite detailed that I spent time on it, so you can read those, and I'm not going to make that case here today, because of all the issues in here that I think are somewhat not empirically based, I could accept and would accept. I can accept that we don't give our citizens the same consideration, the same type of pay raise that we're giving ourselves. They deserve a bigger dividend than $1. And it's not a big difference between $1 and 0.9887. It's $7 million. We spent $7.4 million on dedicated pay raise for public safety. That makes sense. But we can also find $7 million, which we split with the schools, to give our citizens a revenue neutral tax break. And they're still going to get a bill increase, most people are. I'm not saying that everyone's going to get their tax bill less, but at least it shows we have empathy for those 1,123 people who lost their business last year in Virginia Beach for the city treasurer. It's going to have people who lost their jobs, had their jobs reduced, got demotions. We aren't showing enough empathy when we have the capacity to do so, and that is the reason why I cannot support this reconciliation budget as it's read. And then you can read my critique for yourself on the actual details, and I'll be posting that on social media. But that's my comments, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Good. Anybody else at this point? Okay. Yeah, Ms. Henley?
May I ask? I don't think we can go beyond this without talking about this pay increase for public safety. And I know that this has been not just a high priority, but our top priority. And I think probably Mr. Moss even agrees with the fact that this is extremely important. He just would like for us to get there a little different way. For the past several days, we have had a lot of emails. And I have really learned a lot by reading those emails. And one of the things that has impressed me so much has been the commitment and the dedication of our public safety people who have written the emails, either themselves or people have written for them. And I think it just speaks such volumes for not only our public safety folks, but our people in the city, that they really value the fact that we must be and are a safe community. And I was just over and over and over again, the commitment came through in those emails. And there was one yesterday that we got from, I think, a retired police officer from another Virginia locality, and he referred to Virginia Beach's police department as being a jewel. And I thought that was so important that this was the way another department in the state would say about ours, because we know that and we value that. But I think with all that has been going on, you know, when we had the events about a month ago, and it's all very tragic, and it's still, of course, at the top of our concern, we said, what do we have to do to make our police department and our public safety people able to do what they need to do and do it well? And I think I appreciate the staff coming through. I know we said to the city manager and the police chief, what is it you need? And I think the action that we took a couple of weeks ago and the action in this budget speaks very clearly that we want to make certain that our folks are the most professional, the most well-trained, the best equipped, and we're willing to step forward and make certain that they have what it takes to do that, even to the fact that, as we know, we have to be concerned for the people, the officers themselves. And I think what this does clearly speaks to that. And I think it's so important that we are stepping forward to all of our public safety people and saying, we get it, and we know how important you are, and we're willing to, you know, to take these steps. And I really appreciate all that everybody has done in coming together. And now we just have to, you know, make sure it works and it gets put to the best advantage. But I just want to thank Jim Wood for pulling this together. And you might want to comment, if you would, Mr. Wood, when we talk about this structural compensation increase, what does it mean for the actual people? I know that different people who maybe are at the top of their range usually get a different kind of increase, if at all, and so forth. Can you give us some insight in just what this does?
Sure. So, and Mr. Manager, if I mess up, please feel free to interrupt me. So there are ranges in every job title. So if someone is topped out, and let's say there's a 3% merit increase, that person would not receive pensionable money. They would receive a bonus. That would be 3% of their salary, but they would not move. What this does is this moves everybody 5.5% up. So it moves every pay range up from police recruit all the way on up. And that's helpful for us for recruiting and retention. Now, what I will say, and I have no empirical evidence, all I have is anecdotal evidence from speaking to people that folks are now reconsidering retirement because, you know, they can do an additional 3 years with an additional amount of money with the 5.5% and then the merit increase. So I think that's helpful. The incentives certainly are helpful, and they are pensionable. You know, I had a reporter call me yesterday asking about the budget, and he said, you know, you need to read Norfolk's budget letter. And in Norfolk's budget letter, they specifically targeted the Virginia Beach Police Department, saying we want to surpass them. So in terms of recruiting, so that kind of showed where that was, and I think we need to realize that there's a finite supply of qualified public safety folks and people that are willing to do the job, given the hazards and the stresses and everything, especially now. So I think we in this budget, we are giving the manager and his employee, the chief, the tools that they need, and we toss it back to them, and we say, you know, we're a policy body, they're the operation leaders, and, you know, here are the tools, just make it work. And I have every confidence in our dynamic duo from Cincinnati to get that done.
Okay, Mr. Moss and Mr. Rouse.
During the, it'll be short, Aaron, I know you haven't spoken yet, but during the questioning, I had asked questions relative to the license plates reader, and I said that before that we made the procurement, and I hope the council of the body would agree, that I would like to see, these are big privacy issue concerns, that the General Assembly acted on facial recognition for the same reason. So I would like to see the governance, the business rules, And I'd also like to understand what are the personnel sanctions for its misuse? Because those things can be misused, and I think first and foremost, collecting data is one thing, but the governance over the data is what the citizens expect, and that's where trust is built. So I want to understand what that is, and I hope that the body would agree that we would want to see that before that was implemented so we could talk to the public, because those will be questions that we get. And I know there has been abuses in other cities of those systems. So it's not just, hearsay, it actually has happened. So I hope we could get that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to take this time really quick to address all of our city staff throughout our city and just let them know how much we appreciate them and all the work and all the commitment and dedication that they have in supporting our city. I think we all understand from the tragic events of 2 years ago, May 31st was a truly, truly horrible and dark day within our city, and that our staff is still as well trying to recover and healing from that. And so while this 1.5 compensation increase does not heal or complete them all the way, it's a small token to let them know throughout this pandemic, throughout our darkest days, throughout our storms and things that come along our way, they still arrive to work. They still show up. They still help our citizens. They still provide all the information that we ask for throughout, whether it's communication office, finance and purchasing, public works, public utilities, the people, the foundation of this city. It keeps us going, even provides the things our first responders need, those who are not sworn in, the 911 callers, those who keep the precincts clean, those who keep our buildings clean, those who wipe the mic in and out every time someone speaks. We thank you. We thank you so much for all that you do and that you're not overlooked. And that we are truly a team, so I'm proud to support this increase for compensation increase to let them know that we only go as far as they're going to take us, and that they are included in this in Virginia Beach, and they would truly what makes our city strong. And again, I just want to say thank you for your hard work, for your dedication to our city, and keep up the great work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Henley.
I don't mean to monopolize, but I did have another couple of points. It's good that I think we are recognizing the importance of good compensation for all of our employees, and we're able to do that additional 1.5%. But where does this put us with the market salary survey? We're still going to be doing that, aren't we? We just maybe are not going to have that gap that we would have had we not done these. And how are we going to adjust that? Because it's been a long time since we've done such a survey. And I really think we kind of need to know where we stand, but just where are we with that?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, at this time, pending council's approval of the reconciliation document on May 11th, staff and I are going to sit back and reassess and then provide a recommendation to council. The concerns is that with the cost of what we're doing here with the compensation increases, some of the resources that we're going to use to fund it, we're taking from that as well. So we're going to reassess and bring a recommendation for council to solicit some guidance on what we need to do with next steps. We haven't awarded a contract yet, and we're still going through that procurement process. But before we award a contract, we'll lay out a recommendation and a path forward to seek council's guidance.
One of the writers in one of the emails, I think maybe even today, kind of reminded us that a few years ago we had a policy that we were going to be the best paid employees in the region, and our employees. And we kind of held that for a while, and then it kind of slipped, and they kind of said that's going by the wayside. Well, I kind of like to know where we do stand. I know that we have some areas that are very hard to hire, because people can do so much better in other locations, or maybe in the private industry. So I think we really need to know where we are. But, I think in light of everything that has changed over the last year with the pandemic and the way we're all doing things and the world is operating, we're really going to probably be doing a lot of reassessing with how we do work and so forth. So it's really a time, I think, for us to make sure we complete this job and see where we really are, and maybe if there are changes that we need to make. And another thing, we didn't get around to hearing all of the presentations, and in going through those that we didn't hear, I hope we'll take time to let those folks come and stand before us in some of these following weeks, because there were some important things in there that I think they maybe wanted to say to us. Looking at some of our other appointees, I'm looking at the city attorney. I think maybe there's some need for another attorney or so in that office, and I think the city assessor had some concerns for us too. And so we maybe didn't hear everybody that we should hear. And I really think that, we're looking at some other funding that's waiting out there in the wings later on, and it may be that we have an opportunity to make some other adjustments that we're not getting made here in the budget. But I really think that we've made a good start with this reconciliation to maybe move forward with some other things. Another thing that I just want to mention, because I've been saying this all along, I know that with the whole public safety issue and the issue with police, there are two parts to it. There's, of course, the police department and making sure they're professional and well-funded and well-paid and so forth. But then there's that other part that we've talked about, and that's mental health. And I know the cry around the country has been, defund the police and put more funding in mental health. Well, we are funding our police, but I think we're also going to have to do more with mental health. And some of these pass-throughs that I think the federal government and state are working on, I think we need to as well. And I really hope we will continue to look at this whole issue of mental health as far as it applies. I mean, we look at all these things that are occurring around us, and it's an issue there that it's not, we think, well, that's another level of government that's supposed to be funding mental health. But I think we've got a role in it too, and these are our citizens, and I really hope we will continue to work on this issue and see if there are not some places that we can do a little better and do a little more work. And then to get back to Mr. Moss's favorite topic, the flooding, we've got a few things in here addressing that. Just to say to our folks, we haven't forgotten the issue. We're going to get back on it, and I'm assuming we'll start talking again about this possibility of a referendum, because if we're going to do it, we need to come up with that pretty shortly. So we've got still a lot on our plate, but I really appreciate all the work that you guys have done to pull this together, and I think it's a good document.
Thank you. Mr. Moss.
Just a couple of points. On the total compensation study, I always said, don't ask questions you aren't prepared to live with the answers to. What do we do when the answer comes back and we find out that the compensation in some sectors and some occupations that we just approved in these, or you're looking to approve in these, overcompensated significantly to the marketplace when you look at total compensation, which includes benefits? I don't think anyone, so be careful. We've done a lot here. I think if you go on ZipRecruiter.com or any of these other things, quickly checking, which I've done, you're going to be surprised that you might not be, and I'm sure that some of the managers want to come back and educate us. It may be something, like I said, don't ask a question you aren't prepared to have the answers to, and maybe the answers could be embarrassing to the decisions that you made today. So I just throw that out as a word of caution. With regards to flooding, while we do have $5 million more, we also reduced the ability of us to borrow for flooding by $69 million, by giving $69 million of additional borrowing authority that they previously didn't have for school modernization. And why school modernization is nice, I think dry homes are nicer. So I think we need to remember that we've done that. We haven't made the allocating our net available borrowing capacity to our highest threat, which is flooding. So we haven't done that in this budget, so we ought to be honest about that. So I think those are two things to bind that. And I think you have to think about this budget. If people look how you spent their money, what's the likelihood they're going to vote yes in November when they got a tax increase when everybody else got money? You might find out the audience isn't very receptive. We've had that problem before. I've mentioned this early on. There is an optic that we need to overcome. Are we being the best custodians of the money that we have? And we're telling the public, not only do they get a tax increase here when we could avoid a tax increase, tax rate increase, but we're then going to ask them in November to pay higher taxes. And then they're going to say, but what did you do with the money that you had? All of us have to answer that individually. I'm just telling you that we have a headwind that we didn't need to create, and this reconciliation budget creates that headwind.
Mr. Tower?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I heard it from our current president, but it may not be original, but the saying is, you know, don't tell me what your values are. Show me your budget, and I'll tell you what your values are. I've certainly tried to keep that in mind in looking at this budget. It's a very troubling budget to me. I suppose any budget, given the responsibility we have and as many people and as much money as we're talking about, would cause some sleepless nights. But I tend to agree with Mr. Moss that the full funding of 5.5% without any real data to supply it seems enough to clearly answer anybody's question. Are you fully funding everything your public safety people need? My fear is that we may be funding it and then some, just because there are different kinds of job classifications within that. The pace of events in the city, I think, has influenced what we're doing here. In a perfect world, perhaps I would vote against this budget because it did not do it. I'm not going to vote against the budget, but I do want to first tip my hat to Mr. Moss for his pithy analysis of this issue, and I really think it's got something to it, and I think we're going to have to we're going to have a number of issues to deal with. I think funding public safety comes pretty much near the top of my list of things that I'm responsible for, so I'm willing to take that responsibility, but it won't be easy. The other thing I would say is, in addition to not having the market survey, which I wish we had had before we had to fund these significant increases, is that if you have a market survey and you don't follow it, it is not the end of the world. There can be reasons you don't follow the market survey. I'm not saying you have to get a market survey and do exactly what it tells you to do. There may be reasons you want to emphasize one, or you're trying to lighten up perhaps because of staffing issues and the like. But not having one seems to me to be irresponsible, frankly. And the city manager's comments trouble me, that it sounds like, well, maybe we're not going to have one after all because we use the money to do this. But I hope he just simply means he's going to try to find another pot of money to do that, because I really believe that we have to live up to the truth of what the market tells us, and we have to adjust, at least in time, to that market. We can't do this. We can't do this just on gut feelings. It just, to me, it just doesn't work that way. I do appreciate all the work that Mr. Wood put into this reconciliation letter, and I've already tipped my hat to Mr. Moss, and I thanks to all of you. I think there's some tough decisions in here. And bottom line, I'm willing to live with the compromises that we have. There's certainly got some things in here that I wanted and asked for and very happy about. So I can't say I didn't get anything out of this budget in terms of what I thought was right. And I am happy that we're funding the police to a higher level. I think it's absolutely clear that that's an imperative, and I'm glad we're doing it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Wooten.
Thank you. And so I have already sent out a response regarding the reconciliation process and what we have before us. At the top of my list and my concern is the amount for the police oversight panel. As I mentioned already, $100,000 is sorely, as you know, insufficient to support a panel that's going to include investigators, staff, production, so on, equipment and so forth to help make that panel successful. I sent some other information to you regarding another budget that was more along the lines of $600,000. And in that information, it showed in the budget that $100,000 went to an investigator. So, you know, again, that tells me $100,000 is just not going to be enough if we really want an effective police oversight panel. At the bottom of the list is funding for the Centerville Rec Center that I'm requesting in the amount of $5 million for research and design for that particular, that district. That, you know, the total amount, of course, is going to be more and will be addressed in the future, but I just think we need to start somewhere. There has not been a starting point as it relates to funding this facility that I can recall and looking back through the budgets. And so I'd like consideration, you know, for that particular aspect. And as we're looking at the budget to see if it reflects, you know, our whole city, I just want to be mindful that, you know, Centerville has not had a rec center, has not had funding placed towards a rec center in the budget in the past, you know, and we can continue to kick the can down the road if we like, but we do have to address it. And now is the present time. No, there's no time like the present to address that. And so I would just ask for consideration for that era as well. So thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, thank you all very much for the collaboration and the spirit, and as true in any collaboration and negotiation, not everybody gets everything, but as long as we are moving forward, I think it's going to be very, very important. We have certain needs, and thank you all for that. Okay, at this point, do we have council liaison reports? Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I have two liaison reports. First, as you recall, the Mayor's Commission on Offshore Wind, Clean Energy. We've had one virtual meeting so far. There's going to be an in-person meeting coming up. Right now, there's about 23 members representing the military, utilities, civic leaders, business leaders, and regional leaders. And it's very, very interesting, eclectic group of people, and we're moving forward on that. Second, as you all remember, we reconstituted the Board of Building Code Appeals. And one of the things we noted from the previous Board of Building Code Appeals is that some of the people we'd appointed had actually died, moved away, and all that sort of thing, and they never met. So they have had one in-person meeting and two virtual meetings since we reconstituted them. They have updates and on the code, education on the code. At the next meeting, I believe Rod is going to be the star attraction and going through the whole open meeting and that sort of thing, and conflict of interest things. So it's refreshing to see this group of people, 100% attendance at every single meeting, which is really good, and they're ready to take on any appeals. So just with that, just those two things, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Moss?
The status on where we are with the Stormwater Management Appeals Board. To Mr. Danny, I did reach out to the engineering department at Old Dominion for an academic member for that proposed 5-member board. I think that's still scheduled to come to us in June, I think, correct? And the individual professor didn't quite seem to be the right one, but now she's agreed to go out and canvass the entire department so we can get someone to be an academic. And I know that we're looking for a lawyer, we're looking for a retired practitioner, and we're looking for a citizen and maybe then a third to have a 5-member board so we may be starting July that we'll be able to take and adjudicate appeals to the stormwater management regulations we adopted last year. But that's the status of that.
Thank you. Anybody else for liaison? Ms. Wilson?
The Broadband Commission is going to be meeting May 14th. What they have done is they have sent out RFPs for a two-prong approach to do a PPE from the private sector to completely build the ring and to operate it. And then they sent out another one for the localities to build it. So those things are coming in, they'll be evaluated, and I think we'll know more when we meet on May 14th. I also believe in the Rescue Act money. There's a lot of money in there for broadband, but it may not be available until next year, so we're just not really sure how all of this is going to come together. But we do have, at least ours is, the design is at least 60% complete, which would put us ahead of a lot of people.
Thank you. Anybody else for liaison?
May I just comment on that? There's been an awful lot of interest, and I think you all have gotten a lot of emails from folks who are concerned in the Princess Anne district by not having providers and so forth with internet. And of course, it's it's one of these issues that we have been working on through this procedure for a while. And I know that even the concept of the broadband ring came from our staff, and it's something important, particularly for rural areas. And I think, with everybody working from home this year and the kids working from home to do school, it's certainly an issue that we really need to give a lot of attention to. Do we have any idea at all of any kind of timeline to actually make any of this happen, or where we stand with the regional concept and so forth?
We're moving right along. I mean, we've got most of the design, so this is actually, this is the next step of deciding, how we want to go and how it's going to be paid for and awarding contracts. I presented to the authority that the council wanted the private sector to do it, but I was outvoted on that. But I told them that's how we felt, so I don't really know. I do think it's going to be really important that if they decide to let the localities pay for it, because there will be money coming in from the Rescue Act, that it be divided equally. I don't think this should be divided by how many miles it is, because if it's owned equally, it should be divided equally with the payment of the cost of it, and also whatever profit it makes should be divided equally. I don't think that Virginia Beach should be carrying the heavy load on this. If all the cities are equal, then we should all pay for it equally.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, council comments. Mr. Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've been at the convention center for a while, and there's been a number of requests to potentially move back to City Hall. I think with advertising and notifications and everything, we could target probably the first meeting in July. Is that correct, Ms. Barnes?
Vice Mayor, we could actually do it earlier, save and except for you all are going to be talking about ordinance and the short-term rental ordinances and resolutions, the modifications that planning considered. So knowing that there'll be a large crowd for that, it's probably best to remain here until July.
Okay. So the purpose for asking this is to see if there is a will amongst council to relocate back to City Hall, knowing that virtually everybody's been vaccinated that chooses to be vaccinated, and that the staff indicates the air quality issue can be managed with occupancy, if that's correct, Mr. Duhaney. So if that's, I think Amanda was going to call around and talk to everybody, but it might be just easier to get a consensus here today. So if anybody, I see a lot of heads nodding yes. Does anybody not want to move back?
Aaron, not move back?
I don't mean to say it like that. How's the parking arrangement there and everything, and people coming, and I'm sure they're completing the building, the new city hall. There's a lot of construction going on over there. So, what is the parking arrangement situation over there?
Councilmember Rouse, the parking arrangement would likely be that, and forgive me if I get the building numbers messed up, but the parking arrangement will probably be that parking will be set aside for council on the area where building 18, like right in front of the council building, but it won't be inside that parking area that they typically used to park at before. But typically the meetings are held in the afternoons or the evenings. So usually the formal session in the evenings where you have most of the public attend, the parking lot should be relatively empty for the public to attend, but we can carve out additional parking for council specific parking as well.
And the air quality would be mitigated how?
Because it's a little bit warmer than when we first initially went back on the governor's orders. The windows can open inside the council chambers, and then also we will still maintain social distancing inside the council chambers, and we'll put an overflow in the lobby area with seating in a distance way as well.
So it'd be even more limited capacity there as opposed to here?
I think probably there'll be about 20 to 25 public seating available for the public inside the council chambers, and possibly 30 to 40 inside in publicly in social distance inside the lobby area.
I'm open if the council will to go back. I'm open to it. I'd rather stay here, but if everybody wants to go back, I can go back as well. That's fine.
Okay, if I could just comment to Aaron's point, a couple of the mayors are working with the governor, hoping to actually increase the capacity also right now, as we're showing some, positive trends. And obviously it would behoove us, given, the events coming up, whether it be 4th of July or something, to try to get open safely as quickly as possible. Mr. Moss?
And I'm happy to move back, is the informal conference room. I saw the setup for social distancing when I've had meetings in there, and you couldn't even get all the council members at the table before. So if we're still operating under that auspices, then the chairs that are available for the public all-alone staff, that's a whole different assessment from the chamber itself. So I'd like to hear how that part's going to work, because a lot of our business, and people do show up for that, they do sit in there, and and body language is 85% of communication. It isn't all just, watching on a video, but I am concerned about providing how we're going to deal with the occupancy of that room, and I would just like my concurrence to be conditioned upon seeing the layout for how we're going to occupy that room, which means there's going to have to be staff come when they're needed versus just sitting there waiting, because the public should have first right to be in that room if they're present, but just how we're going to manage the setup for the council itself and what the remaining occupancy of the conference room is. That's my concern.
Well, I'll tell you what, John, I think there's something we can look into, but I also think as we're progressing, people are flying now more, and people are, and even the CDC, mentioned that 3 feet should have been more appropriate than the 6 feet.
I'm just saying, tell us what it is, but if you're asking for our opinion, which you've asked for, I'm trying to provide it based on the knowledge that I have.
I appreciate that, John. Okay, Ms. Henley.
Oh, I think it'd be wonderful to get back to the municipal center. It'll be much better for us to be able to relate with staff, and staff to have more contact with the council in a much easier fashion. So I'm all for it. But I think, of course, in thinking of this whole COVID thing, and now we're at the stage where the state is doing the program here. I'm kind of wondering, are people still coming for vaccines? I mean, I'm hearing that, folks are not as anxious to get the shots, those folks who are not yet vaccinated. And how are we going to, or do we have any kind of plan for encouraging these folks who have not yet gotten vaccinated to get vaccinated? I on the news this morning very early, it seemed like there was a place in maybe the Chesapeake Health Department. I mean, they just said, you don't have to live in Chesapeake, just show up today and get a shot. Well, we're still requiring appointments here, aren't we? I mean, I think we really have to do whatever it takes to get these people who've been reluctant to be willing to get their shots now. And are there things that we can do to, to encourage these folks? And I guess the younger teens will soon be eligible, so that's a big group of people. But I really, I think we've got to, these last reluctant people, we need to make it easy for them. So are there things that we can do? I was just really happy to see Chesapeake being so willing to vaccinate people who don't live in Chesapeake and, hey, just show up. I thought that was great. Can we do that?
Okay, we can certainly look into that. Anybody else for council comments? Ms. Abbott?
Thank you. Louis, there's a stack of paper right next to you that needs to keep going down. What Louis has and what this half of the table has is the resolution I brought forward in late 2019 with respect to backyard hens, and it also includes the issue of potbelly pigs, or mini pigs as they're also called, in creating an urban agriculture advisory committee. Councilman Berlucci and I have been reached out to by a number of people, and so he's agreed to co-sponsor this resolution with me, but it would create a urban agriculture advisory board with the purpose of addressing typically agricultural uses in the urban parts of our cities. This specific resolution addresses 3 specific items: backyard hens, potbelly pigs or mini pigs, and then also a city composting program, which is another thing that the urban agricultural community, we'll call it that, has reached out to me about. And in terms of how this is different, it does itemize those 3 things specifically. It also says that it'll consist of 11 members that will mirror how our body is set up, so there'll be members from each district plus 4 at-large members. And then they'll also have staff support from the Department of Agriculture, Planning Department, Department of Housing and Neighborhood Preservation, the Health Department, Animal Control, and the City Attorney's Office. And so they'll be tasked with bringing back a recommendation on those 3 items and hopefully get us to a place of consensus. I know there's many, many residents that are very concerned about this issue, and I hope to get this on an agenda sooner than later. And I don't know if Mr. Berlucci has any comments to add, but I'm happy for any feedback, co-sponsors, or general comments.
Okay, Mr. Bellucci.
Sure, thank you. I do have a few comments that I'd like to add, and then I'd like to take that opportunity to talk about something else, if that's okay with you, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
First, I just want to thank Councilmember Abbott for bringing this to my attention, as well as to the many residents who have reached out to me on this issue recently. Of course, this issue was brought to the council before I joined the council, so I was only familiar with the discussions as I read about them in the newspaper or on social media or just in conversations around the community. And what I've discovered since I joined council is that there's a very large community of people who are very interested in the council finding resolution on this issue. And I have a lot to learn about the question, particularly as it relates to backyard hens. Obviously, I think we're all in favor of composting and programs like that, but how can we expand them and make them more accessible and available to more people? And but I think, we all remember the beautiful pig who we saw pictures of at our council meeting about a year ago. And really what was illustrated by that was that, people have different perspectives on issues of what is a pet and what is, I don't know what the technical term is, livestock, and different definitions of that. And, Virginia Beach is a place where we all should be able to enjoy our lives in peace and in freedom. And so my goal in joining with Councilmember Abbott on this ordinance to create an advisory committee really is to help to find resolution on this issue, because I'm hearing from a lot of people who are looking for us. I have a lot to learn, particularly as it relates to backyard hens. I think there's been a lot of interesting information presented about some of the complications that could exist, and those are valid, and I'm hopeful that this group can help to work through some of those things to find resolution. And I really applaud Councilmember Abbott for taking that initiative and look forward to the chance to work with her on it. And I'd like to transition now into another topic which I think is very important, and that is the city's pandemic relief partnership for nonprofits. This is an extraordinary, innovative, really incredible application of the CARES Act funding we received, that this council appropriated $6 million in the form of $10,000 grants to our city's nonprofit organizations. And these nonprofit organizations provide critical services, educational services, cultural services, environmental services, on which residents of our community rely and enjoy. And they've suffered, and as well, of course, they're contributing to our economy and providing jobs for Virginia Beach residents. And they've been impacted by COVID-19 just as businesses have, just as our schools have, just as the city government has. And I think this council was really wise to make this appropriation and make these CARES Act funding resources available to our city's nonprofits and nonprofits who serve our residents so that they can get through this difficult time and rebound and recover. And so I really want to thank the council for approving that. And I want to make sure that residents of our city know that they still have until May 7th to apply for that, which is available on vbrelief.org. And finally, once again, at the risk of being gratuitous here, I want to thank Councilmember Moss for his strong advocacy in establishing this program. And I appreciate his foresight and wisdom to be an advocate for that program, and I'm really sure that it's going to make a positive impact for people who live and work in our great city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Great comments. Yep, Mr. Moss.
I just want to thank Michael for the kind remarks, and I think one of the things it demonstrated to us as council members of the community is the latent capacity of these NGOs, these nonprofit organizations, to more effectively and more efficiently than we could do with our own organic resources. And these organizations, because they don't operate under the same kind of standards because of how the money was arrived at, of getting an application, getting a rule, getting the standards, that government has a difficult time of being compassionate. And that's what makes faith-based delivery of many services so much stronger. And it's in fact, because it's a personal relationship rather than a governmental entity. And so I hope as we look forward to other challenges in our community that our first resort will be to see how can the existing infrastructures of NGOs, rather than increasing additional capacity in government, can deliver those services and put more of the actual product into the hands of the customer versus into overheads. But Mike's right, these NGOs play a vital role, and I think the food bank, to me, is one of the best things we ever did in terms of improving the day-to-day lives of our citizens on food security. And we were certainly the only place in Hampton Roads that made that kind of investment in our citizens. And I'm very proud of the staff and this council for what we did with the food bank, and I hope we can continue that relationship. The need is great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. Moss, that was so well articulated. Government, can't possibly do everything, especially get deep into the neighborhoods. And there are quite a number, like you articulated, the food bank and many other, and they also have a tremendous outreach with mental health and, things of nature that, fill in the cracks what government can't complete, but, well stated. Okay, let me finish out with this. About a week ago, I did the reading of a proclamation at Arbor Day. And I stood in front of 800 trees that were planted, I guess of last year. And Mrs. Henley was unable to attend, but I did give her a major shout out because of her advocacy for trees. And they gave me this, which I'm going to give to Mrs. Henley, about 41 consecutive years of being honored, for our initiatives, with trees and the value of what they bring to our community. Not only for aesthetics, but for flood mitigation and things of that nature. So, Mrs. Henley, I would be honored to give this to you based on your efforts.
we really have some dedicated folks in our city who work on this whole issue with the Arbor Day and the trees all year, and particularly I think of Susan French and Frank Finches and all those folks, and they do a great job. And yeah, those 800 trees, I hope they're all living and we can plant some more in a little while. That was a result of this council being willing to do that, and I think I appreciate all of that support. Thank you.
And believe me, a lot of the folks sang your praises that were there, and it was, very well, to honor you in that way. Okay, at this point, Mr. Vice Mayor, can we do the agenda review?
Okay, Mr. Mayor, under ordinances and resolutions, does anybody want to hear any of these items or vote against any of the items? Mr. Moss.
Is your mic on, John?
Just give me a moment. I got to turn to the page and get my notes, but I'll just come back to it.
Anybody else? Okay, I'm back to you.
I think this is where, that's quick. It's the one at 41st Street. Maybe that's under planning, but I thought
That's under
it was-
planning.
Under planning, okay, that's what I'm looking for. Thank you. That's why I was studying
Okay,
my paper.
so ordinances, resolutions, everything's on consent. Under planning, items 1, 2, and 4 have multiple speakers. So the only one that potentially could be on consent is Grace Bible Church, Virginia Beach Incorporated, for modification of conditions where a religious use adjacent and south of 2285 London Bridge Road in the Prince Stand District.
Yes, it can be on consent, but I want to be absolutely sure, and I mentioned this to Amanda already. I believe what happened is that, they have been, they've done a very good job with these conditions, the staff has, in making certain that we are very specific about how we want these conditions to be carried out. When I picked up the agenda this morning and really looked at the ending of this item and saw the conditions that the way they apparently started out at the Planning Commission, I said, wait a minute, that's not quite enough, and then I found them at the beginning. But if you notice all these underlining, I think they were added maybe after the Planning Commission. But one of the things that I have learned is that with conditions, we have to be very specific about how we want them to be carried out. What we talk about in our discussion really doesn't carry the day. 5 years from now, when there are an entirely different staff doing the administering the conditions, they've forgotten some of the things. And I wanted to make sure that since this was going to be another raised parking lot that was going to adjoin a residential area, that we learn from our mistakes. And that's why it's very specific that these boundaries, these buffers, are supposed to be landscape buffers as we have seen them, and these trees are supposed to keep growing. They're not supposed to be cut back and made to be a little 4-foot hedge between the neighborhood and the parking lot. So it's all very specifically spelled out, just what's to happen. And then as far as the lighting, it's very, very important that the lighting be no taller than 4 feet when it's adjacent, but the higher lights no taller than 14, and it's all supposed to be shaded and so forth. So when we are approving these conditions, we're approving these conditions in these underlined sections. And I haven't heard from Mr. Badon, so I'm assuming that's okay with him. But I really want to say how much I appreciate this church in being willing to work with their neighbors and being aware that a lot of traffic can be a nuisance to neighbors if it's not carefully managed, and they've been very willing to work with this issue, and I really appreciate it. And like I say, we just have to learn from mistakes sometime, but I hope this will make this one acceptable to the neighborhood. I've not heard any opposition from the neighbors. So assuming that these conditions are all right with Mr. Badon, who's their representative, that can be on the consent agenda.
Okay, is that it? Okay, at this point, the chair will entertain a motion to recess into a closed session pursuant to the exemptions from the open meetings allowed by Section 2.23711A, Code of Virginia as amended for the following purposes. First, publicly held property, discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for public purpose or of the disposition of publicly held property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiation strategy of the public body pursuant to Section 2.2, 3711A3, Beach District, Princess Anne District, Princess Anne District. 2, building security matters. Discussion or reports of plans related to the security of any governmental facility, building or structure, or the safety of persons using such a facility, building or structure pursuant to Section 2.2, 3711A19, Police Security Brief. Legal matters, consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation where such consultation or briefing in an open meeting would adversely affect the negotiation or litigating posture of the body pursuant to Section 2.2, 3711A7, Holloway Vet et al. Versus City of Virginia Beach, and personnel matters, discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body pursuant to Section 2.2, 3711A1. Council appointments, council boards, commissions, committees, authorities, agencies, task forces, and appointees. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion and a second. Madam Clerk?
Sorry. Councilmember Abbott?
Aye.
Councilmember Lucci?
Aye.
Councilmember Henley?
Aye.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Moss?
Aye.
Councilmember Rouse? Councilmember Tower?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson?
Aye.
Councilmember Wooten?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wood?
Aye.
Mayor Dyer?
Aye.
11-0.
Okay, at this point, let's take a short recess before we go into executive. Take a break.